We're joined by Avi Mayer, editor of the Jerusalem Journal, former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Avi, you heard what Alistair Bunkle had to say there. The fears this is the beginning of a permanent occupation of Gaza. Is that what we're looking at?
Well, good morning. I certainly hope not. I don't think there's a great deal of appetite in Israel for any permanent presence in Gaza. I think most Israelis are growing quite tired of this war, but they also see that the war's goals have not been achieved. Now, in stating this new policy, the Israeli government said that there are three goals. The first, of course, is the return of the hostages, the understanding being that it is military pressure that has pushed Hamas back to the negotiating table in the past. The hope is that that would happen again. The second, as noted, is the eradication of Hamas's ability to retake the territory militarily and to pose a threat not only to the people of Israel, but also to the people of Gaza. And the third is to create this new distribution mechanism for humanitarian aid that ensures that aid is getting to the people of Gaza and not to Hamas, as it is doing at this point. Now, whether that will succeed remains to be seen.
All the aid agencies are saying that new way of distributing aid is incredibly dangerous. They're saying you're forcing citizens into a militarized area. They're saying it's possibly illegal.
Yes, there have been certain objections raised by the United Nations and other aid agencies. The challenge, of course, being that they have not developed a viable alternative that prevents that aid from falling into the hands of Hamas. We know that not only does Hamas utilize that aid to feed its own fighters, which of course keeps their fighting going, but it steals it in order to then sell it at a huge premium to the people of Gaza, who, of course, need it so desperately. The idea here is to create a mechanism that would prevent that. There are, of course, many questions as to how that will work, but the Israeli military and the Israeli government say this is the only way that that can happen without that aid falling into the hands of Hamas and actually getting to the people it's intended for.
Because the accusation, you'll be aware of that people have made this, Avi, is that the Israeli government are using this aid as an instrument of war against the people of Gaza. They're denying people this aid. There are people, we know, we've seen the photographs, there are children starving in there, and it may well be the case that some of that aid is being misappropriated, but there are people. The result now is there are people starving in Gaza, children starving in Gaza, and that is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, look, it is undeniably true that there is suffering in Gaza at this time, and humanitarian aid does need to make it in. We do, of course, see those images of deprivation of families that are struggling to feed themselves. And we also see images of markets overflowing and of areas in which Hamas is more present, where there's actually quite a great deal of plenty at this time, as Hamas is distributing that humanitarian aid to its own people, or again, selling it to Palestinian families who need it most desperately. That is exactly why the Israeli government has created, or is in the process of creating, this new mechanism to distribute that aid. But yes, of course, there are many questions as to how that's going to work and how it's going to be viable.
In terms of the new strategy, the Israeli finance minister told Israelis on Monday to embrace the word occupation. This has been greeted with horror across the world. There is a view that this is basically, as Alistair was saying, just the beginning of a permanent occupation of Gaza, a displacement of the population. Some people even using the term ethnic cleansing.
The finance minister is one of the two most extreme voices in the Israeli government. He is not at all representative of the sentiments of the Israeli public. I think that it would be viewed with a great deal of horror by Israelis as well, who have, as I said, no appetite for any long-term presence in Gaza. No one wants to see Israelis staying there ad infinitum. We know that this has been like in the past. We've had long stretches of time in which Israelis have been present in Gaza, and that did not end up well for anyone. But there's also realization that the goals of this war have not yet been met. Hamas still does pose a threat of some kind, and that cannot be allowed to continue.
So the result of that is that hundreds of thousands of people will be forced to move yet again.
Well, again, there are different ways of viewing it. That is, of course, one. In the eyes of the Israeli government, they're evacuating this population to ensure that those who remain behind are only Hamas, so that they are the ones who are being targeted, and it's the civilians who are being spared. That does, of course, put the civilians in a tremendously difficult spot. But the reality is, as the correspondent said earlier, the experience has been in the past that those areas that are evacuated by the Israeli military after military operations have been concluded do see the reemergence of Hamas. And so the only way to prevent that from happening, again, in the eyes of the Israeli government, is holding those territories for some period of time to ensure that Hamas does not reemerge, does not rearm, and does not pose a threat again to the people of Israel and to the people of Gaza.
Avi Mayer, editor of the Jerusalem Journal, thank you indeed for talking to Newstalk Breakfast.